Hi, welcome to Say It, I Dare You, the podcast where we pull apart personal meanings of taboo and hard to say words and phrases with lovely guests and gentle peer pressure. Today, we are talking about personal finances. I don't know about you, but I personally really hate talking about this topic, so maybe it'll be me being peer pressured today. I am Quinn, and today I'm joined by my good friend Ciara, who's been a really big cheerleader in my life to destigmatize a lot of conversations around finances. Ciara is a corporate baddie through and through. She currently works as a financial operations manager in corporate America, working with contracts and finances and sales support across Canada. She has a degree in business administration and has previously worked in various banking roles. So it's safe to say that she has a lot to say about this topic. So, C, thank you, first of all, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I'm happy to talk about this because we talk about this all the time on this very couch.
We do.
We'll kick us off by starting with just your honest explanation for why you feel like you relate to this episode title in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of finance, I feel like understanding finances or just having some sense of financial literacy has always been somewhat implicit. My dad has this funny story about when I was a baby, like a baby, and he was trying to get me to crawl towards him, and he was pulling out toys and pulling out other things to try to get me to crawl towards him, and nothing was working. And then he pulled out his credit card, and then I started crawling towards him. And similarly, just like growing up, like math didn't always make sense, but if I could convert it into money, it made a lot of sense. So it was like, what's 75 times 8? I had no clue. But if you said like, how many quarters is 75 times 8? I was able to tell you, like, and it was very easy, but it's just been money has made sense for me, and it's just been something I've been interested in throughout my life. And even the like not interesting things, like I would think I was 9 years old when the financial crisis happened, and I was a 9-year-old learning about derivatives, and
You're so lame. But
I know,
I support it.
I know, 100%.
I say that lovingly.
Yeah, it's just like one of those like weird interests at the time that my parents were like, oh, it makes sense, when I decided that I was going to go into finance. So it's just something that I've always kind of been interested in. I didn't always consider it for a career, but then once I did, it just, things started clicking, and I love to be able to like talk about finances and help my friends. And when I was working at the bank, I was able to help people there, so it was very gratifying. So
like I said kind of in the intro, like Ciara has truly been a cheerleader in our friend group to be like, hey, let's talk about this, let me help you figure out this, or like she taught me about GICs for the first time, and like I was 24, like I wish I had known about them earlier, but I didn't have anyone in my life to kind of like sit down and talk with me about it, and it's been super helpful to have like other young professionals, young corporate baddies to talk to about this, especially as like people who live in Toronto, where it's incredibly expensive to live here and finances just like have to be top of mind. I want to actually be really clear that we are not going to be giving out any financial advice in this episode. We're just here to like talk about why it feels weird and talk about all of the concepts of it to hopefully make it feel like a little bit less weird to talk about. And so that being said, I'd love to know like why you think people find this topic difficult to talk about. Like I know my perspective on it, but like what's yours as someone who's like, oh, that's easy?
Yeah, I mean, first I just want to give a quick disclaimer to your disclaimer. No, we are not providing financial advice. Anything that I'm saying throughout this podcast are things that are solely my opinion and not the opinion of the organization that I work for. I have to put that disclaimer
cover it. You got it.
Gotta cover my bases, you know. I talk about confidentiality and like that stuff for a living, like it's top of mind. But what was the other thing I was gonna say? A lot of things I'm gonna talk about are just from what I've seen. That doesn't mean it's everyone's universal experience, and I also might talk about some things that work for me. It may work for me, it may work for the friends that I talk to, it may not work for you. So just a quick disclaimer about all the things that we're going to talk about, but let's get into it. Can you please ask your question again, because I've already forgotten it.
Of course. Those disclaimers are incredibly important. This podcast is for fun as much as it's kind of serious. Why do you think people find this topic difficult to talk about?
I think I think, at least from my perspective, I think a lot of like our society, your value is so deeply rooted in how much you make. And that's so, like, it's not, who am I to say it's right or wrong, but I think a lot of people grow up being told like, oh, like you have to be a doctor so you can make money, or like you have to do this career so you can make money, or like I think there's a lot of pressure to get to 6 figures and like things like that. So I think a lot of people tend to tie their self-worth to their salary, but also to their financial position in general. So like even if you are making good money but you have a lot of debt, I feel like a lot of people take that very personally and carry a lot of shame about it. So it's something that can be very difficult and very uncomfortable to talk about, but it's still important nonetheless.
Mm-hmm. I feel like kind of eliminating that shame about it is what makes it easier to talk about, at least from my perspective. Like being able to talk to someone like Ciara, who is like, it doesn't matter that I know more than you. Like there's no shame in what situation you're in. It's more about like, you know, knowing what situation you're in. Like, how do you be proactive? How do you make goals? How do you achieve them without like also like giving up the opportunity to experience things in life? Like there is a balance that I think we talk about a lot. Why do you feel like it's easy for you to talk about? Like what makes you different as someone who doesn't feel the discomfort that other people feel?
Because I talk about it every single day. I do it for work. I get paid money to talk about money.
Right.
So I think a lot of it is practice. And I think it's also just like gauging where the other person is at in terms of like having the conversation and being able to read like body language and knowing like, hey, like what needs to be said, what can we hold off on for another day. And that can be in conversations like with your partner or like even like with yourself. It can be hard to, like if you've been ignoring your checking account for a while, ignoring what's been going on in your bank account for a while, it can be very hard to bring yourself back and to really take an honest look at where things are at. I think the other thing that's really important about just looking at your finances or having conversations about it is taking a matter-of-fact approach about it. Like take away the self-worth, take away the whatever. It's like if you have $20,000 in debt, you have $20,000 in debt, and it's just a fact, and there are no feelings around it. That is so much easier said than done. So much easier said than done. But for me and in my job and in the jobs that I've held, it's something that you it kind of just becomes matter of fact. And I've been able to then take that approach to my own finances because it's just another conversation that I'm having. Yeah.
I feel like the entire concept of this podcast is like, what are the skeletons in your closet and how do we pull them out semi-aggressively? Because it truly is like, shame is just this like awful storm cloud in human life. And it doesn't matter what you're feeling shameful about. Shame will stop you from actioning, like actually getting out of the pattern that you're in that is creating shame in the first place. Now, not always. There's some like socioeconomic life circumstances that approach it, but oftentimes it's something that we're feeling because of what we think other people feel about us. And therefore, leave the skeleton in the closet. It's easier to ignore the $20,000 in debt than it is to pay it off. Paying off $20,000 is a big feat. But a lot of people look at, a mountain to climb and go, well, I'm not fit. I can't climb the mountain. I like the way that you kind of preface it as like this shame-free, like it is a factual matter of fact, like you deal with what you got to deal with kind of thing. A little bit of a pivot here, just in that in our friend group and our friendship alone, we kind of always joke that like I'm the friend that tells people to quit their jobs and start a business. Whether you think that's a bad influence or a good influence is to be determined. But Ciara is the friend that tells people to ask for a raise and then tells them how to ask for a raise. So in saying that, especially as like young folks living in Toronto, do you feel like someone's income can affect their comfort level in these conversations?
I think that like every aspect of someone's lived experience can affect their comfort level in terms of how comfortable they feel talking about these things. I think a lot of it probably has to do with like your upbringing and like, was it something that your parents talked about? Was it something that your parents talked about in front of you with your other parent or with you or with your siblings? Like what did that look like? And our ideas around money are largely formed when we're children. Yeah, I think it's also like where I think a lot of socioeconomic factors, but also just like whether you're a woman or a man, whether you're a person of color or not, like there's stats around this.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, like I'll speak for women because that's what I know most of the data has been done around. But like that women are paid less than men, and sometimes it's like, how much are we asking for it? And that's not putting it on women at all. At all. Like, and just quick disclaimer, like that is not putting it on women at all. But just how we're raised in society, in our society, it can be I think a lot of times women feel like, oh, like I feel like I'm asking too much, or like this is gonna put my boss in a bad situation, and whereas like, no, you should just ask for it. Yeah, like you should just ask.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I was just gonna say, as a freelance writer, like this is I'm not just like negotiating my salary on an annual basis. It's like every other week when I'm talking to a potential client, I'm like, anyway, here's how much I think I'm worth. And it's like the bane of my existence, my least favorite part of my job. But I've also thankfully had like female founders come back to me and be like, you're worth more than that. Here's my budget. I'm going to pay you more than what you quoted. And I got a little bit of a slap to the face of like, oh shit. Okay. Like I am to the same caliber as other people who are charging more, just because I have less time, or I think I'm young. Like I have suffered a lot of ageism. Like, what does that mean? Like, don't take any of that into account when you're asking for a raise. Like, ask for your worth, ask for, you know, what somebody equal to you is being paid, regardless of your own insecurities.
Yeah, age is also another really big factor. And I think a lot of like Gen Z in specific have a lot of imposter syndrome, and just being like, having trouble knowing their worth.
Yeah.
And part of that's just like comes with experience. Like a lot of Gen Z are in the first like 5 years of their careers.
Yeah.
So that can definitely play into it. The other thing that I was going to say is that like you are your own best cheerleader when it comes to your own compensation.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something, so I work for a sales organization, and something that I'll tell some of the salespeople is that if you're not getting rejected, or if you don't have people saying, hey, sorry, it's going to need to be a little bit lower, you're probably not asking for enough.
Yeah. Yep.
So
I actually have this like career coach who coaches a lot of folks through like marketing and freelance or whatever. And she'll set a goal to be like, oh, I want you to get 10 no's. In the sense of like, if you get 10 no's, it means you put yourself out there 10 times and your 11th one might be a yes. But instead of being like, oh, I want like one new retainer contract this year, it's like, no, the goal is to get 10 no's for retainer contracts this year, because at least I'm trying. Like, what's the worst that could happen? They say no, you know?
But that's the other part of it. This is why people probably don't ask, is just the fear of rejection.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be really hard. But again, it's like, closed mouths don't get fed.
Yeah.
So you gotta ask for it, and just like learn to be okay with if it's a no. But a lot of times, especially when I feel like when it comes to compensation, or at least in my experience, there will be someone will try to meet you in the middle, and it may not be that you're getting the 100K salary, but maybe instead of 80 you're getting 90.
Yeah.
So it's give and it's take.
It's always worth something. Yeah. Funny that you like mentioned kind of like statistics on women, because my next question was, do you think women are socialized to not speak up about finances? And I feel like it's like 3, 2, 1. Yes. The answer's obvious, but tell me more about your take on that.
I feel like it's just been a male dominated industry for a very long time. Mm-hmm. So if we're really looking into it, we have to look into the history of like, women couldn't have bank accounts.
Womp womp.
You want to save money? You can't.
Yeah.
You're not married? Fuck you.
Yeah. Put the cash in your drawer and do your best.
Yeah, it's like for however long women couldn't have financial goals, or couldn't have their own bank account, or couldn't, you know? So it's we have that in our history, and that's not that long ago.
Yeah.
So I feel like stems from that, but then has evolved into where we are current state, which is finance being a male dominated industry. And that's kind of a broad statement, but if we look at the stats, maybe there's more women participants. But if we're looking at the C-suite execs, like what percentage are we looking like? Like how many of your C-suite are men, and specifically white men, and how much of your C-suite is people of color and women or queer people? You know, like it's
disabled folks.
Yes,
anyone other than a cis white man.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Like I do most of my freelance writing in like the startup and entrepreneurship space, and startup world is very similar. Like the stats around, female founded startups, and even just like their VC funding or like their ability to get investment, basically. It's really, really sad. Now I'm going to say a number, and I want to say that it's part of the McKinsey study, and so if I get this number wrong, I will fact check myself and input it somewhere else, but I believe it was 1.9% of female founded or of venture capital went to female founded businesses in 2021, and 1.9% is sad.
Stupid.
But it's also down from where it used to be at a solid 2.6. So we're getting worse somehow. And it's really unsettling because it is a matter of like where are our opportunities to be educated? Where are the people being like, oh, go do that for a career, not go be a nurse, go be a doctor, go be a childcare attendant, like go do finance, go get into investment, get up into, startup world. Like, there's not as much encouragement for it, I find. Yeah. And like just thinking about like even what your comment was about like venture capital and investment, they are like, I don't know, like we don't have to take it in this direction if you don't want to, but like some of the conversations we've had about the questions that men ask you about the company that you work for. And like, I mean, it also plays into like what kinds of companies are women founding, and for you, can I bring this up? Of course.
For you it's birth control and like a software to help women access birth control, but you get a lot of really unintelligent questions from potential investors. Absolutely. We have an episode with the founder of that company this season, so keep an eye out for it. Ooh. But yeah, I do consulting work for a startup working in, they're building an app for birth control matching and tracking. It's super cool. But as part of that executive team, I've pitched, I've done conferences with them, and I've shaken the hands of many a men that like don't care to ask the question about how we intend to grow, what our revenue streams are like, how we have our feet on the ground in the States. We don't get asked the business questions. We get asked like, well, how many people actually use birth control? Cough, cough, 52% of the world is women right now. And that's just talking like binary scale. A lot of people are looking for this information, and yet we're stuck educating, how many folks. I'm sure all of this stuff is going to be in the birth control episode too, but basically the barrier being, it's not a world that men pay attention to often, and it leaves us kind of hanging sometimes on opportunities that could otherwise be, what's your growth plan for the next year? Great, I'd love to tell you. I'm actually wicked smart and I could tell you. Like, yeah. But you don't want to know that. You want to know like, oh, well, but you're 25. Are you sure you know what you're talking about? Like, womp womp. Yeah. I need like one of those soundboards to be do womp womp womp. Yeah, that would be fun.
So
next time,
I want to know if you've ever been in a situation where you've talked openly about personal finances and were like either shut down or made somebody really uncomfortable, or it made you uncomfortable. Like, yes, you're nodding yes.
Yeah, I mean, it happens, especially. So I worked in banking for 3 years and in a few different roles. But like I was having conversations with people about the current state of their accounts very frequently and trying to help people determine like what they need to save to get to their financial goals, whatever those may be. And I think because people tie a lot of their self-worth to their financial situation, and they do feel a lot of shame around their financial situation, it can be difficult to talk about. And I've definitely had conversations where people have been visibly uncomfortable, and I've had a couple of conversations, knock on wood, that it doesn't happen anytime soon, but like where people have cried, and like it's not been in like an angry way or in a like really upset with me type of way. It's just deeply uncomfortable. And I think when people have been ignoring their finances and then are faced with like the reality and what they're going to need to do to regain control or to achieve their financial goals, it can be incredibly overwhelming, and that's completely okay. Like, and it's never any kind of situation or any conversation I've had that has gone that way, the person has left the room feeling like they know what they need to do, at least, or feeling like they have more understanding. Even if they don't feel like they have control, they know how to get back to having control. So I feel like it's necessary to have those conversations, even if, and sometimes especially if, they're uncomfortable. So like, yeah, it's happened, and it'll probably happen again. Yeah. Just in terms of being in a role where I'm supporting a lot of people and talking about people's compensation currently, or people's financial situation holistically in my previous roles, like it's gonna happen again.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's okay, because like, again, if I am able to help someone feel like they know what they need to do to regain control, it's well worth it, even if it is uncomfortable up front.
Yeah, I'm absolutely the one. I mean, both when I used to work in corporate and now even just kind of like in a community of freelancers where I have no shame in being like, so how much do you make? Especially as a freelancer, because I feel like we can help each other out and be like, oh, you actually get paid that much for the same work. Like I've been charging my clients less. Can we talk about how you got there? And like really just the camaraderie of it. But also in corporate, like I found out that I was being underpaid comparatively to like equal, if not like people who were working under me. And I was like, well, if I had never asked, I would have never known. Like, there's nothing wrong with asking. You know, there's like taboo conversations about like it's like ill-intended to ask, or like you're not supposed to talk about how much you make, but like why?
And there are laws to protect you, to allow you to speak about what you're being paid with your coworkers. Yeah. I can't speak for the US, but specifically, at least for Ontario, like there's legislation in place which allows you to share that with your coworkers, and I would encourage it so that you don't end up in a situation like you're talking about, where you have people who are doing the same work and getting paid more.
Well, and I would hazard to say too, like if you are working for someone who is adamant and like aggressive about not sharing your financial compensation, it is likely because they're hiding something that they don't want you to know.
100%.
Like that is a red flag to be encouraged not to talk about those things in a workplace. In my personal opinion, now I am in a privileged spot where, because I work for myself, I don't have to deal with those politics, but I've been there. And I would still encourage the conversation. Yeah,
100%. It's I don't want to say crucial, but it is oftentimes and unfortunately important to ask those questions to make sure you are being fairly compensated.
I'm wondering if you still feel uncomfortable talking about it ever, like for yourself, not making other people uncomfortable, but do you ever find you're like, oh, I have a skeleton in my closet, or oh, I'm tripping up about my experience?
Not in particular, but I'm also speaking from a place of like, right now I don't have any debts. Right. I've paid off my car. I currently rent, so it's not something that I feel a ton of stress about. And like, I've probably had conversations with my partner that are like, I'll say not emotionally laden, but that can verge on the edge of uncomfortable, just because it's like, well, how do we do this? How do we, like, no one tells you how to. There is no perfect roadmap for moving in with someone and then deciding how you're going to share or split your finances. Yeah. And being in the field that I work in makes it easier, and I think it's a lot more uncomfortable for her than it is for me.
Ciara and I kiki about this all the time because we are in similar positions in terms of like being the
financial instigators.
I was about to say the instigator. The instigator to be like, we're talking about this, and not in a negative way, but just in like a, you know,
we need to figure shit out.
Yeah, we're also the Google Calendar holders. There's one in every relationship, and it has to be someone.
Who are you?
Yeah.
Respond in the comments.
So I want to know also like how you feel now about people coming to you about this topic, at me who always comes to you about this topic, but people in general, I guess.
No, I love it. I and like, to be honest, I wouldn't do the job that I do if I didn't like being able to help people from a consultative standpoint. I will say that like, if a random just dumped their financials into my Instagram DMs, I promise you I will not respond. But like, at least in my work and with my friends, like, it's something that I love to talk about. And like, I don't know, I love to be able to work through things and maybe share some suggestions that might really help people in the long run. Financial literacy is not something that is common, and it's not something that we're taught unless you really seek it out. I was very lucky to go to a high school that had classes on how to do your taxes and like,
oh my gosh,
yeah, and like what
in
are
London, Ontario,
right,
of all places.
Yes. What is a bond? How does the stock market work?
Oh, big question.
Big question. But just like managing finances throughout your life. Like, what kinds of things are you going to look for when you're younger versus what kind of things are you going to look for when you're 80 and you could kick the can at any moment. So that was something that was really helpful. But I know that not every high school has those classes. And then same with like post-secondary education. Like, first of all, not everyone has access to post-secondary education. But also even then, they tend to take a lot more of a high-level approach, not to use corporate speak right now, but high-level approach to finances and personal finances. And you're probably not talking as much on the personal finance level. So I've been very lucky to have certain jobs where I get a lot of exposure to that. But also I've just taken a very strong interest in it, so that helps me. Yeah. But I also know that that's not everyone's cup of tea.
Yeah. Don't we all wish that we could have taken like a strong interest in something incredibly useful? Because I like really love music, which strong interest, it's really fun. It doesn't help me buy a house. It doesn't help me move my life along much, but some people are like, I have one of my really close friends just like knows literally everything about turtles, and I personally think she's one of the coolest people ever. But what is she gonna do with that? Sorry, Jenna.
But it also goes other ways. Like, something in my adult life, something that I have shed tears over, is that I wish I was into, and I wish I could get into, like, home decor.
Oh, I was not expecting that. We say sitting in front of a blank wall. On
exposed beige couch. On my beige couch on a beige carpet. I really struggle with it. Funny. And that's something that I literally, like, my partner brought it up to me. I shut down. And she's like, what's going on? And I was like, I just can't.
I love that so much. I think your apartment's cute.
Thanks.
You're welcome. I remember when you first moved to like the GTA, Greater Toronto area, and like showed us, you had like one piece of art on your wall in like your old apartment, and you were really chuffed, and then you were like, it's my roommate's.
Literally. I really can't for the life of me get into it. I just can't. But people are interior designers, so
some people get really into it, and
some people get really into it, and I just need to find those people.
Band together. You help them with their finances, they help you with your beige house.
Yes, that is a symbiotic relationship I need.
I can't help you with shit, I'm so sorry. If you ever need anything marketed, give me a call.
Nothing coming to the top of my mind. Great. I'm sure it will become useful at some point,
maybe one day.
My
next question is, well, part of navigating these conversations is education. Like you said, like you found a niche interest in this thing and you educated yourself pretty hardcore on it. Do you have any tips for people who are interested in getting more comfortable with this topic? Kind of like what worked for you to keep looking into those things? Or
yeah, I think there's just so many resources out there these days, whether that be on TikTok, YouTube, TikTok or YouTube, and granted, not everyone's advice on those platforms is going to be kosher or good. I should say good. a lot of those things may not apply. And just like from a Canadian lens, a lot of the resources out there are specific to the US. So I think because what works for everyone is very different, it's important to find different resources and look for someone that resonates with you, and then just look at all their content and or if not all their content, look at the things that could benefit you. So if you're in a position where you need to pay off some debt, see if that person has some resources or some videos or whatever on how to consolidate and pay off your debt. If you're in a position where you're wanting to invest but have no idea where to start, see if they have videos on that. And then also, as a former bank employee, the other thing that I have to say is just go to the bank. Set up an appointment, see if you can get an appointment with a financial advisor.
Jerry, my guy's name is Jerry. I love him.
Jerry, exactly. So you'll have a Jerry.
Yeah.
Like there will be a Jerry ready to help you. And you can also you can just call in and say, I'm looking for a general appointment. I want to do an assessment of my financial situation and see if there are certain recommendations or if they're what I should be doing, basically. Yep. Granted, I'm going to put a disclaimer on this one as well. Bank people, especially if you're at like one of the big banks, they have sales quotas.
Yes.
So
watch out.
If they are offering something you don't need, don't take it.
Yeah.
Don't take it.
Yeah. A piece of advice my dad gave me once was like, financial advisors, especially through banks, like absolutely go, but like go, leave and Google everything before you decide what you're going to do, because it might be like a mutual fund. It might be something that they are getting, like you said, commission or sales quotas on. Not commission, but you know what I mean.
Sometimes commission.
Yeah.
Depends on the financial institution.
Yeah.
I was not commissioned.
Womp womp.
Womp womp number 3, bitch.
Yeah, womp womp. But it is important to be like you said, not all of these resources are reliable. And so like as much as it's good to do your research on your research, make sure that things are cited and understandable. I'd say like another thing that I've found helpful that I like avoided for a long time was like actually action the things that you learn. So like if somebody's like, oh, I have this template for this monthly budget or whatever for people who have like a non-stagnant income like mine, and I'm like, oh, that's great, I would just download it, and then it's like in my downloads, and I'm like, wait, I should actually try it and see if it works for me and edit from there.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is like what works for people is going to be so vastly different. And that's something that I experienced, at least working in a bank, is that like something that may work really great for one person could be someone else's financial demise.
Yeah, nightmare.
Yeah, so like I can just speak personally, like something that has really worked for me and something that I've been trying to do forever is just automate as much as possible. I don't want my finances or where I'm investing or where I'm paying things off to be at the top of my mind all the time, if I can avoid it. Like it just takes up brain space and it takes up time. So like if I can automate my bills, I'm going to automate my bills. If I can automate my finances or automate my investments, I'm going to automate my investments, and just put a little bit away every week or every 2 weeks, however frequently I'm getting paid at whatever job that is. Just because it takes so much of the brain space out of it. And it's like, I can just kind of know like, okay, I've got it. Yeah. And I've been the culprit of putting things off too. Like I remember there was like a time where I had too much money in my checking account and I was just sitting on it for probably like 6 months before I was like, I just need to put it somewhere and then keep on like putting like little bits in, because otherwise I'm just gonna I'm not going to do anything with it. And then I'm going to be 40, and then I'm going to be really regretful that I never did anything with this.
I find a lot of people who I know who have struggled with either like not a lot of conversation around it in their upbringing, or, you know, who've been through poverty, do a lot of money hoarding. And like I've been there and thankfully gotten out of that habit, but it like money makes money. And that I think is something that we are not taught early enough. And like to hoard cash for the sake of feeling like you have savings, like liquid cash is important to have. However, to a certain extent. And then past that, it's just like, it's emotional. It's not responsible.
Yeah. 100%. I think it can be very like you're asking yourself all the questions, especially if you have been in situations where, what's the word I'm looking for? Where you've been financially insecure. Like you don't want to feel like if I put this money in an investment, like, will I be able to like keep myself afloat if something goes bad? Like those thoughts are like, if there's a rainy day, like where am I going to pull from? Like I need to have this cash in checkings. But in reality, there's like a lot of in between steps where you can put money in a place where it's at least making you something. Because money makes money.
And I'm sure, like, I've looked into this slightly just for people that I care about who've gone through issues with like this, in terms of like there are resources. Now, ironically, they're usually kind of expensive to access. However, there are resources for people who like need to rewire their brains around like what money is and make it less emotional and make it more what you said, like factual and matter of fact. Because if it stays emotional, like it stays emotional, then you're every 2 weeks when your paycheck comes in, you're rehashing all these feelings of shame and guilt and fear. But there are coaches and people who, again, do your research on your research. They might be just scamming you, but like, you know, reach out to other folks who've used them. And some people find really great benefit from talking to people.
Yeah, no, I agree. Even if you just have like a friend or a Jerry or a Ciara in your life that like is comfortable talking about that kind of thing and can maybe help you work through like, what do you have right now? What do you want to do in the next year? What do you want to do in the next 5 years? And those things can be really daunting questions.
Yeah. It's I would have not thought I would be right here 5 years ago.
100%. Me neither.
In Toronto. I did not think I was getting you in Toronto, but I succeeded.
I didn't see myself in Toronto up until I was in Toronto. But now I'm here and I'm so happy that I am.
Oh, well, I'm happy you're here.
Yeah, but I think just getting practice talking about it, like for me, I practice it constantly, so it's something that I'm not as uncomfortable about as probably the general public. But even just like practicing talking to yourself will help you remove some of the fear, maybe, or just it's repetition, you know.
Destigmatize it,
and it starts with yourself.
Yeah.
So
aw, you can do it. You can do anything you put your mind to.
Yes,
I believe in you. Well, thank you for this chat. It's been lovely. I knew you'd be an absolute whip at this. I'm not surprised. Where can people who are listening find you on the interwebs, if you want that?
I am very inactive on social media, but my Instagram handle is at Ciara Chute. CiaraChute.
Wonderful. Do not DM her with finance questions.
I mean, if you say like, "Say it, I dare you," sent you, maybe.
Don't open yourself up to that.
It depends. It depends.
Okay. Yeah. Well, maybe you'll be lucky
for a low fee
of $5 million per DM.
$5 million.
Yeah, better get that savings plan in order.
Yeah. No, just come work at the company that I work at and then we'll talk.
Yeah. Well, that's the end of this episode. Thank y'all for listening. You can find us at Say It I Dare You at Say It I Dare You Pod on Instagram and TikTok, and we will see you again next week. Thank you, Ciara.
Thank you for having me.
Bye, y'all.
Bye. I hope I wasn't breathing into the microphone.